Hello everybody and welcome! As you may have guessed from the title, this video is going to show you a bit more behind the scenes, what goes into actually making a video from KSP and presenting it to you in a digestible way. But, well, I thought we'd do things a little bit differently. Usually these types of videos start with the making of and then you see the final product. But I don't want to bore you with the longer stuff, so let's get right into the action first. I'm going to show you the actual finished video, which is this here. We're going to launch some style of SLS type rocket with a big ass fairing. And after that entire mission has finished, there are some chapter markers. If you aren't interested in that and want to go straight to the making of, I'm going to dive deep into how I did this, what went into it, what didn't work so well, what I also had to do in order to make things work, and yeah. What you can see here was inspired by something somebody posted on my Discord server, link is in the description by the way, and this is some kind of dual Mars sample return kind of thing. So I decided to do a dual Duna dropper thing, so a doo-doo dropper? Yeah. Anyway, subscribe if you're into weird KSP videos and a dude talking over it. Anyway, we are now in a stable orbit around our home planet, and what we're going to do now, of course, is to make our interplanetary burn towards Duna. So everything is set up in a way that we get to the planet, get into an orbit around it, then also establish some communications links, and then get everything down to the surface. So you saw just a few seconds ago the encounter we got with Duna, and now we're on our way for a couple of months or years or whatever time it takes. Thanks to the time warping feature, we can easily skip ahead until we have arrived. Just like this here. So now that we are here, we need to get into a stable orbit and not just pass by the planets. So we have enough fuel in the tank of our upper stage here to do so. By the way, that upper stage is a fully autonomous vehicle with also relay capability. I didn't really have any plans for that. I just wanted to avoid having my probes, my uncrewed vehicles to get out of communications range. So everything is a bit overbuilt, maybe. Speaking of communication, we're deploying our relay satellites that I'm going to set up around the planet. Ideally, you space them in like a triangular pattern. I once did a Google Sheets calculators type thing where you can set up a resonating orbit with like 3 satellites, 4 satellites, whatever. Usually I take that to calculate which orbit I get to. And now we get the first lander to return some samples from planet. So basically dropping the first doo-doo. Yeah, sometimes I'm childish, I apologize for that. Anyway, we are going to set up down here on the bright side so we can actually see what we're doing. And I've brought probably too much of a heat shield. Yeah, this is a bit of an overkill since Duna does not have that much of an atmosphere, but it's going to slow us down significantly. It's not so much for the heat shielding. And we also have some parachutes, so once we have the parachutes deployed, we can get rid of the front heat shield, the inflatable heat shield, and also of the extra tanks I brought along to have some more Delta V, to have some maneuverability in this if I would have had needed to adjust the orbit more precisely. And yes, of course, we need some landing gear so we don't crash when we touch down. Okay, we're on a somewhat flat piece of land, which is great. But yeah, KSP being KSP, the suspension is made out of skis, basically. And so while that thing came to rest at some point, I am now going to show you the second landing. And once again, we are in the atmosphere now. We're already through the heating part, which didn't take much of an effort, fortunately. And then again, same procedure as before. A lot of double things going on here, since we have 2 landers at the same time. And, well, not everything is going to be exactly the same. For instance, this landscape. It's, of course, a bit different than the other one, and all the nice terrain scatter is, of course, by the Parallax mod by the great modder Lynx. And yeah, once again, we're sliding down. But then once both have stopped, it is time to deploy our sample retriever rover. Basically, it's a science rover with all the possible science packs on board and the science generation arm and a science package that's going to be put back into the lander, or rather ascent vehicle, if we're being honest. And well, one of them didn't come out as nicely as the others, at least nothing exploded, and it worked fine. So we have also some solar panels on there and enough batteries for it to work for a while. So let's get cracking and search for some surface features, for instance this here. So we're going to extend the arm and scan that, of course. I don't know why I really like that animation. First it goes on with the laser, and then with the drill, and then some other stuff. And yeah, of course, this is not super realistic or anything, but it's a nice thing to see. And it sort of reminds me in spirit of the Mars rover's Perseverance. And wow, shame on me, I just blanked on the other one. Okay, now that we got all the samples, we need to get back to our vehicle and deploy our sample. But we have switched now to the other one. This, as you can see from the different terrain, is the second rover, while the other one makes its way back to the ship. We also grab some Duna berries. I think they're called Duna berries or Duna blueberries or whatever. Yeah, I forgot. Anyway, same thing here. We get back to our landed ascent stage. And then, of course, it's time to get the rover on board, which we're doing right now here in Duna Dual Vision. Once again, one of them doesn't quite have as easy a time as the other one, probably because the lander is a bit more tilted to one side. Okay, view from the inside. Here's what's happening. The heat shield of the return capsule is opening, and then we're pushing the science package, where all the science information has been collected, upwards into that capsule, and then retract our robotic arm and close the heat shield up again. And then, when everything is fine and dandy, we get out of Duna's atmosphere. And in order to do that, of course, we have to ascend. And since both are exactly the same and start from, well, not exactly the same location, but it's a similar scenery, I'm going to show you just one of the ascents. Just believe me that both have been successful. Alright, we are dropping the first stage of our ascent vehicle, and the second stage is also our interplanetary transfer stage, seen here through this donut. Alright, and this is now the circularization burn. And once that has happened, of course, yeah, the other one also did it as well. I staggered them a little bit, of course. It was not all exactly at the same time, because I cannot be in two places at once. Would be interesting, though. Anyway, of course, solar panels on board as well. We have been using those on the surface as well, of course, to keep things running. And then it is time, of course, to plan our maneuver back to Kerbin. And for this, I use my mod, the transfer window planner. My mod, of course, I have it just installed. It's the mod by TriggerAU, who also worked not only on KSP 1 for real, but also on KSP 2. And unfortunately does not do so any longer because, yeah, development for KSP 2 is now paused, on hold, cancelled. No official confirmation except that the studio has been shut down by publisher Take-Two. Be that as it may, we're returning now from Duna, first with one of the Duna droppers and then with the second one. Well, now it's not really a dropper now that it has come back out of the atmosphere. In game time, these two vehicles are spaced like 2 or 3 days apart from each other, so they're both inside the transfer window between Duna and Kerbin. but of course we have enough time to adjust their orbits and get them landed without missing either of them and zipping past the planet and ending up in interplanetary space out anywhere and yeah, wasting our delicious science package that we have brought back home. As you can see here, the parachutes are working fine and we're descending down and then we finished the mission. So this is the finished product. How did I do it? The first thing is I started out with the rover because the rover would define how big or small the ascent vehicle or descent vehicle, in general the entire rocket and delivery system would have to be. So I really wanted to have, of course, that science package, and then I also wanted all the other potential science that I could get. So it would have meant Science Junior, the mystery goo, the graviolo detector, seismic detector, etc., etc., and of course the probe arm, so we can actually collect a surface sample. And you see me here speeding through that build. The idea of that was, if you can see the mass indicator, that I keep the science package in the center. So if I extend that up into the ascent vehicle, that everything would stay stable. So it's time to actually test that. Well, driving is not really the problem here because, of course, yeah, it's kind of stable. But then my first approach of that extension mechanism was not that great. So, again, yes, I had to do it again, and I decided to go for the piston approach. So I used the longest, smaller piston for this, and yeah, of course it works, but does it work with uncoupling the docking ports? Because I wanted to check the clearance, and yeah, apparently clearance is okay, nothing snagging or stuck. So what else can we do? We had our return capsule. The idea here is that the science package is going to make a unit with the heat shield via the docking ports. So as soon as the science package is on board and the heat shield closes, everything is going to be rock solid and stable inside the central column. Now it was just time to give it enough delta V to return from Duna back to Kerbin, and of course make it somewhat cool looking. Not sure if that succeeded. If I did, tell me in the comments. And also if I didn't, tell me in the comments. Anyway, so this is the first attempt at this thing. So also we're going to test this here, but what are we going to test? Well, again, clearance issues. I wanted to find out whether or not I can separate this from the lower portion, actually just the propulsion module from the dropper capsule, so that it can separate cleanly and the heat shield doesn't get stuck on those panels. And as you can see, everything is looking great. So I thought, well, let's drop this and see if it survives. Not realizing I forgot the parachutes. Again. Yeah, of course. Those have to be added as well if this should deliver the science in one piece and not all over the place. Right. So this is sort of the iterative approach that I usually do with my things. I try one aspect of the vehicle, and if it works, I try the next one. Here I was testing the clearance. Does the science package pass through that ring of tanks? And yes, it does. So now it's time to combine everything. And in order to do that, I checked the diameter that would be needed for putting the rover inside, and lucky me, I built the rover so that it would fit within a 5-meter diameter part. Okay, now it's time to have the first stage, actually, or the real ascent stage for that vehicle. Keep in mind those fuel lines I just showed you. Those are going to be important a little bit later. Yeah, a lot of finagling and moving around. Really trying to place everything in such a way that once I start separating it, things don't get stuck on each other and everything is going to have to in a smooth motion. And yeah. Okay, now we're going to get into the cladding, or making it more beautiful, or whatever you want to call it. So this is kind of a shroud where the ascent vehicle is hidden until we have the descent stage. And I reduced gravity via the cheat menu to see if clearance is okay, and lo and behold, it is. So yeah, that should be a good first attempt. So I decided to, well, let's do it on Juno as well. And yes, this is working fine. Why do it on Juno as well? Well, to see if the Delta Via pact really is enough for the trip. And well, it was enough to get into orbit, but there was a bit of a problem. You see, getting into orbit is one thing, but I had to use a lot of fuel of the return stage. So this should get us back to Kerbin, and I wasn't really happy with that margin. So again, yeah, I had to add a few more fuel tanks to the ascent stage. But unfortunately, I don't have any video footage of that, so sorry about this. And here what we can see is me merging the rover inside the now combined descent, ascent, and return vehicle for our sample delivery, or sample return, rather. And what are we doing here? We're going to, we're going to put a longer pole on that, a longer telescopic arm on that, and in order to align everything, I moved this around a lot and tried to really keep it in the center. Yeah, so this is a lot of finagling with the translation tool and everything, and also some action group adjustment, etc. And now what we're going to test next is whether or not we can actually get the rover out and inside of this, because it looks a bit, I don't know, it looks a bit tight, but it should work. But first, let's check that heat shield on top, if everything works as I thought it would. There we go. It opens, and we now have access to the sample. Well, if we would push it on top, because I decided to test the rover first, so get the rover roving and then get it back inside. So it worked to get out, that worked fine, but the problem is getting it back in. For some reason I wasn't able to get over that really small step here. So, again, yeah, I had to reload and just try to test that sample, retrieve, delivery, whatever system, basically getting the sample up there. And as you can see, the docking ports have engaged, even though they are still a few millimeters away from each other. But if you check the action menus, you can see, yep, there is an undock button. So yeah, they are now connected. Everything is still one unit. And now I retract the arm. And now I get my heat shield to close. And as you can see, I keep the Clampatron Juniors open to see whether or not the undock button will show up once I close the heat shield. And yes, there it is on the lower left one. So we're going to have a rigid entity between the top of the capsule, the sample, and the heat shield. Well, the rover has to get back in order for this to work, so I started working on the ramp. And this proved, well, a bit more of a challenge than I expected, because symmetry issues. I thought, well, what is the best way to go about this? And I decided to just go with one moving part, just one hinge part or rotator part, and then of course add the wing style things to it. And then move everything and adjust it slightly so it would work. And yes, also we put the heat shield on there and some fuel tanks so we can get the descent going. Because it is a descent stage, and Juno, while having an atmosphere, really benefits from having a descent package that is liquid fueled, or even solidly fueled. Is that a word? Solidly fueled? Anyway, basically, you need some propulsive landing. Well, you not necessarily need it, unless if you bring like a gazillion parachutes. but it is highly recommended to do so. And of course, beefy landing gear is going to help as well. Okay, now at Duna we are going to test. You've seen that work in the finished product earlier, but how did I arrive there? Because not everything is complete yet, especially when I botched the landing. Again! Yeah, this was just the testing. This is was not even the final mission. So yeah, first ramp test. We're a bit on the steeper part here, not completely flat, but it should be fine if the rover decides to get out. And yep, after a little convincing, it does. But again, the question, does it get back in? And as you can see here, we're struggling. So why are we struggling so much? Well, the ramp is rather steep, and friction in KSP is, yeah, well, unsatisfying, to be honest. So I probably could have done this after a long time, but again, yeah, I decided against that. I tried to make my life easier and not curse at myself for trying to move up that ramp like this. So I decided to make an extension ramp, some kind of on-ramp for the rover to make it easier to land on. There would have been another option to make like an extensible part on the door that opens, but I decided against that because the door has this curved kind of shape, and I wanted the ramp to be really straight so the rover has an easier time getting onto it. So basically what was used here was one robotic hinge and 2 of the long telescopic pistons. And the trick here was aligning everything so that when everything is extended, it fits, and when it is not extended, it fits inside the 5 diameter part here. And then of course using a lot of tweaking with the KAL 3000, 5000, whatever thousand system to have some automated process going on. And yes, you can see here, it is working beautifully. And there we go, we have our ramp. There is a bit sticking through, there is some clipping going on, but it is going to be manageable because this is exactly the solution that you have seen in the finished video. Again, some wiggling required, depending on where you place the lander and what inclination it is on. But as you can see, a lot easier to get in than with the first attempt with just the ramp. So yeah, made my life easier with this ramp, and it also looks cooler. Don't you agree? Again, tell me in the comments if you agree, if you don't agree. Also tell me in the comments, always happy to go into a discussion with you guys. And now for the ascent vehicle. Let's try this out. And yeah, the additional fuel tanks I stuck on there got it stuck. So, again, yeah, I tweaked that again. I also added those drop tanks, and then I tried it again. So basically what we're doing here, we're going to rehearse an entire landing and then basically return. Okay, dropping, and as you can see here, the ramp wants to open. So what I did later was to set this hinge or this rotator part to a locked position before, well, before launching, I would say, but again, yeah. I tried this again, and in the end it worked, also as you can see in the final video. And then, of course, it was time to build a launcher for this. So what I did here is I took the original assembly of that ascent vehicle, then I copied it and put it on top. I also figured out how to do a relay probe that was small enough to get it on board and don't have a lot of footprint. And then I put everything together inside a package that could be inside some kind of SLS rocket replica style thingy. Yeah, so where to put those so they are not in the way. Yeah, there they are fine and they are not too much in the way. Some staging that needs to be adjusted, so everything is going to be well. What I'm also using is, for this run, I'm using the restock mod. Some of the parts now have different color variants and some different nozzle variants. Overall, I'm not convinced that I'm going to stick with that. I'm so used to how the stock parts look and behave. I don't know. I can see how people are drawn to this and like this, but I don't think I am going to continue with the restock mod. Despite it offering me a beautifully brownish orange variant for the 5-meter tanks to make my SLS replica look the part. Okay, just the finishing touches on the solid rocket boosters. And with that, we're basically finished. Despite me, well, figuring out that due to moving it to from the hangar to the VAB and copying parts over, that basically all my robotics had to be done again. Well, at least the sequencing in the KAL 1000 part. And this is so annoying. I really wish there was some kind of fix for that. But in the end, this is basically what the finished vehicle product looks like. So now we come to the real meat and potatoes, because I'm going to show you the things you usually don't see in KSP videos. For instance, when you time warp, you lose your encounter in interplanetary encounters. For instance, here, now it's back, and then it's gone, and then it's back. So yeah. And if you miss the encounter for a bit, and then you can really not have it. And that's also very annoying. Another thing that happened to me was when I had when I was trying to open the heat shield in the capsule, well, it kind of got stuck and wiggled around. This was fortunately remedied by just quick saving and quick loading, but still annoying. And then there was this. I tried to launch the ascent vehicle, but it didn't work. Remember when I told you to keep those fuel lines in mind? Well, copying this ascent assembly just over disconnected the fuel lines on these parts. On the upper stage it didn't. It disconnected them here. So I said, screw it, I just activated infinite propellant and launched it. So the thing you saw launch, one of them, had infinite propellant on just for the ascent stage, because I knew how far it would go with the proper amount of fuel. And once I dropped it, I switched to the stage that had propulsion and turned off infinite fuel. And was turned on as well was the surface feature finder, because I just couldn't be bothered with the time to search for the features. Anyway, yeah, the final step of that is putting it all together. And this meant, well, looking through hours of KSP video, cutting it all up, putting it all together, shortening it, moving stuff around, making some transitions, adding those dual views I showed you earlier. In the end, this was also a process that took some time, and there's a lot of finagling and finicking with it going around. I'm using DaVinci Resolve, and from the editors I have used for making KSP videos or any kind of videos, it's by far the best I've tried so far. But to be honest, the only things I've tried was Windows Movie Maker. That was actually my first 100 videos, or no, not 100, my first 20, 30 videos or so were done in Windows Movie Maker. Then I switched to Sony Vegas, then it became Magix, or was it first Magix and then Sony? Anyway, I switched to Vegas, and then I became annoyed with it and tried out DaVinci Resolve, and I found it, the free version even, very capable and very nice to use. And because I wanted some features that the free version doesn't have, I in the end decided to buy DaVinci Resolve Studio, and I have been happy ever since for a couple of years now. We're now on version 19 or point something. So yeah, this is just a quick speed run through my editing process. Basically, it's everything I did to get those 10 minutes of mission working, not the making of that you see here. So, what's the tally? Well, if we add everything up, for the mission you saw in the beginning, the first 10 minutes of this video. Building the vehicle, or vehicles rather, took me roughly 3 hours. Flying the mission itself, also another 3 hours, and editing just the mission part, another 2 hours, and adding the voiceover to the mission and getting the voiceover cleaned up and getting into the editor, also another half hour, and then you have to add to that rendering it and uploading it, etc. So basically 8 to 9 hours would be the normal time needed for a 10-minute KSP video like you saw in the beginning. And this was one of the easier ones, if we're being honest. Because if you look at my, well, let's say my most complex, my most ambitious mission ever, this was the Invictus Grand Tour Without Her Planets mission. The game footage I recorded was almost 45 hours. And the editing had to be done across multiple days. And doing the voiceover, I mean, both parts were roughly 1 hour. So if we look at that, you have to add the processing and cleaning up the vocals, etc. So basically multiple hours of voice work as well. I hope you enjoyed this little peek behind the scenes, even though it was a little bit longer than usual. If you enjoy these types of videos, please leave a like down below. And if you really like what I do on this channel, maybe consider looking at my YouTube membership or on my Patreon side, where I offer different rewards for different tiers. For instance, earlier access to videos like this, and also if you go for a higher tier, your name will show up here, like all these wonderful folks that believe in what I do. Thank you so much for your support. It is really, really appreciated. And now that that is done, maybe let me know in the comments what kind of video or what kind of mission or what kind of anything you would like to see next on this channel. I'm trying to experiment with different stuff at the moment to see what sticks. So yeah, your input would be much appreciated. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel for more and follow me on my social thingies. The links are in the description. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.